Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I'm Sophia.
And I'm Mason. We are super excited to be here with you today. We have a very special topic, and it's something that I think a lot of people can relate to. Are you unhappy at work? That's what we're diving into today.
Yes, this is something many people experience but might not talk about enough. Work is such a huge part of our lives, and when things aren't going well, it can affect us in so many ways.
Exactly. Sometimes it feels like we spend more time at work than we do with our families or doing things we love. So, when work isn't fulfilling or when it makes us unhappy, that can spill over into the rest of our lives.
Right, and being unhappy at work can look different for everyone. For some, it might be the job itself they don't enjoy what they're doing. For others, it could be the work environment, maybe the people they work with, the company culture, or even how they're treated by their boss.
That's such a good point. Sometimes it's not even the tasks we do every day that are the problem. It's the atmosphere. Maybe you feel stressed because of tight deadlines, or maybe there's a lot of pressure from your boss to always be perfect.
Yeah, or maybe you just feel like your work isn't valued. That's a tough one. When you put in the effort and you feel like nobody notices, that can really bring you down.
Absolutely. Feeling unappreciated is such a common reason for unhappiness at work. And then there's the issue of feeling stuck, like there's no room to grow or advance.
Exactly. That's another big one. We all want to feel like we're progressing, right? Like there's a next step, something to look forward to. If you're stuck doing the same thing over and over without any chance to grow, it's natural to feel unhappy.
And it's not just about promotions or pay raises. Sometimes we just want to learn something new or feel like we're making a difference. When that's missing, work can start to feel empty.
Totally. And there's also the issue of work-life balance. These days, a lot of people are feeling burned out because they're expected to be available all the time. Even after the official workday is over, they're still answering emails or thinking about work.
Yes, it's like work never really ends for some people. And when that happens, you don't have time to recharge, spend time with loved ones, or do things that bring you joy outside of work.
That's so true. And it's such an important part of happiness, having that time to step away from work and focus on yourself, your family, your hobbies. When work starts to eat into that, it's no wonder people feel unhappy.
Yeah, and I think this brings up another key point: stress. Sometimes we're unhappy at work because the stress level is just too high. Maybe the workload is too heavy, or maybe you don't feel like you're supported by your team or your boss.
Definitely. High stress, especially when it goes on for a long time, can really wear you down. It can even start to affect your health physically and mentally. And that's something we don't talk about enough.
Right. Stress can lead to all sorts of health issues. Trouble sleeping, headaches, anxiety. It can even affect your relationships outside of work because you're bringing that stress home with you.
Exactly. And the thing is, work is supposed to be challenging sometimes, but it shouldn't feel like you're drowning. It's important to find a balance between pushing yourself and taking care of yourself.
Yeah, so we've talked about a few reasons people might feel unhappy at work. But now, let's think about what can be done about it. If you're feeling unhappy, what are the steps you can take to improve the situation?
Good question. I think the first step is identifying what exactly is making you unhappy. Is it the work itself? Is it the people you work with? Is it the long hours or lack of appreciation? Once you know what's bothering you, it's easier to figure out what you can change.
That's a really important point. It's hard to solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is. So, step one is awareness. From there, you can start thinking about solutions. Maybe it's talking to your boss about reducing your workload or finding ways to take on projects that interest you more.
Exactly. Sometimes, just having an honest conversation with your manager can make a big difference. They might not even realize that you're feeling unhappy or stressed, communication is key.
And if the issue is something like feeling unappreciated, maybe there's a way to highlight your contributions more. For example, keeping a record of your achievements and sharing them with your boss during meetings or reviews.
That's a great idea. And if it's the work-life balance that's causing unhappiness, setting some boundaries can help. It might be hard at first, but things like not checking work emails after a certain time or making sure you're taking your lunch breaks can make a difference.
Yes, those small changes can have a big impact on your overall happiness. It's important to take care of yourself and find ways to protect your time outside of work.
Exactly, Mason. Those small changes really can add up over time. I think it's important to remember that taking care of your mental health and setting boundaries is just as important as doing your job well. It's all about balance, right?
Absolutely. And sometimes it's easy to forget that. We get caught up in deadlines, projects, and trying to keep up with everything, but we forget that it's okay to step back and say, I need a break.
Yes, and speaking of breaks, I think one of the most overlooked aspects of workplace unhappiness is simply not giving yourself enough time to rest and recharge. We often think that being constantly busy means we're being productive, but that's not always true. Burnout is real, and if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't perform at our best.
Exactly. And burnout doesn't just happen overnight. It builds up gradually, right? You might start off feeling fine, but over time, the stress and exhaustion pile up, and suddenly you're drained and unhappy without even realizing it.
That's so true. And that's why it's so important to recognize the signs early on. Are you feeling more irritable than usual? Are you having trouble sleeping? Or maybe you're dreading going to work every day? These can all be signs that something needs to change.
Right. It's like your body and mind are sending you signals, but sometimes we just push through it. And the longer we ignore those signs, the harder it becomes to bounce back.
Exactly. And when you reach that point of burnout, it's not just your work that suffers. It affects your personal life, your relationships, and even your physical health.
So true. And I think another important factor we haven't touched on yet is whether the work itself aligns with your values. Sometimes unhappiness at work comes from a deeper place, like feeling that what you're doing doesn't really matter to you on a personal level.
Yes, that's a big one. I mean, we all want to feel like our work has meaning, right? Like we're contributing to something bigger. If your job feels disconnected from your personal values or goals, it can create a sense of dissatisfaction, even if everything else seems fine on the surface.
Exactly. And it doesn't necessarily mean you need to quit your job or make a huge life change. Sometimes it's about finding ways to bring more meaning into your current role. Maybe volunteering for projects that align with your passions or finding ways to make a positive impact within your team.
Yes, I love that. It's about taking ownership of your happiness at work. Sometimes we think we're stuck, but there are often small shifts we can make that lead to a big difference. Like we said earlier, open communication with your manager, setting boundaries, and finding ways to reconnect with what you love about your work.
Exactly. And if you've tried those things and you're still unhappy, maybe it's time to consider whether a change is necessary. It's okay to realize that a job or company isn't the right fit for you anymore.
Yes, and that's a hard decision for a lot of people. But being honest with yourself about your long-term happiness and well-being is so important. Sometimes the best thing you can do is move on and find a place where you feel more fulfilled.
Absolutely. It's scary to make a change, but staying in a place that makes you unhappy can be even more damaging in the long run. And remember, it's not just about the job title or the paycheck, it's about finding a balance where you feel challenged, appreciated, and happy.
Yes, so to sum up, if you're feeling unhappy at work, start by identifying what's causing it. Whether it's stress, burnout, lack of growth, or a disconnect with your values, recognizing the problem is the first step. From there, try to make small changes, set boundaries, communicate your needs, and look for ways to reconnect with your passions.
And if you've done all that and still feel unhappy, don't be afraid to consider bigger changes. Your happiness and well-being are worth it.
Exactly. Life is too short to be unhappy at work every day. You deserve to find a job or an environment where you can thrive.
That's exactly right, Sophia. Life really is too short to spend so much of it feeling unhappy at work. And I think sometimes people feel stuck because they don't know what their next step should be, or maybe they're scared of making a change.
Yes, the fear of the unknown can be a huge barrier. It's natural to feel uncertain when you're thinking about leaving a job or even switching careers, especially if you've been in the same place for a long time.
Totally. And change can be uncomfortable. But sometimes staying in a situation that makes you unhappy is far worse than taking the leap into something new. I think we often underestimate how resilient we are, how capable we are of handling new challenges.
Exactly. And it's not always about a drastic change like quitting your job right away. Sometimes it's about exploring other possibilities, like taking on new responsibilities, going for that promotion, or even upskilling through courses or certifications.
That's a great point. Often, there are opportunities to grow right where you are, you just have to seek them out. Whether it's learning new skills, taking on different types of projects, or even asking for more feedback to improve, those things can bring a sense of renewal and excitement to your work.
Yes, and I think that sense of renewal is so important. Sometimes we lose sight of why we started a job in the first place, and reconnecting with that original motivation can help us rediscover our passion for it.
Absolutely. And even if your job doesn't have that excitement anymore, you can still find ways to bring energy back into your workday. Maybe it's forming better relationships with your colleagues or finding ways to make your daily tasks more interesting.
Yes, that's so true. Finding ways to inject positivity into your day-to-day work life can help lift that feeling of being stuck. And when you're happier, you're also more productive, which can lead to better results and more satisfaction.
Exactly. And you know, another thing we haven't really touched on yet is the idea of perspective. Sometimes our unhappiness at work can come from focusing too much on the negatives and not enough on the positives.
That's a really important point, miss, and it's easy to get bogged down by what's going wrong or what you don't like. But shifting your mindset to focus on what's working, what you do enjoy, can make a big difference in how you feel.
Absolutely. Gratitude can be a powerful tool. Maybe you're not in your dream job right now, but there are probably aspects of it that you appreciate, whether it's the people you work with, the skills you're building, or even the stability it provides.
Yes, finding those small positives can help shift your perspective. Even if things aren't perfect, you might realize there are still reasons to be thankful for the job you have.
And sometimes, just that mental shift can make all the difference. It doesn't mean you ignore the things that are making you unhappy, but it can give you a more balanced view of the situation.
Exactly. It's about seeing the whole picture. And when you start to see the positives alongside the negatives, it can give you the clarity and motivation to make the changes you need, whether that's improving your current situation or moving on to something new.
Yes, and the thing is, no job is perfect. Every job is going to have its challenges, its ups and downs. But if the overall balance is tipping too far into unhappiness, then it's time to take action. Like we've been saying, it could be small steps at first, or it could be something bigger, but either way, you have to prioritize your well-being.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most empowering things you can do is take control of your own happiness at work. It's not always easy, but it's definitely possible.
Definitely. And remember, it's okay to ask for help, too. Whether that's talking to your manager, seeking advice from a mentor, or even speaking with a career coach, there are people who can support you through this process.
Yes, reaching out for support is so important. You don't have to go through this alone. Sometimes just talking about how you're feeling can give you a fresh perspective or new ideas for how to move forward.
Exactly. And on that note, I think it's important to also talk about finding joy outside of work. Sometimes we place so much of our happiness on our job that we forget there's a whole world out there, hobbies, relationships, experiences that can bring us joy and balance.
Yes, that's such an important part of the conversation. Your job doesn't have to be the only source of fulfillment in your life. Sometimes, nurturing those outside passions can make the time you spend at work feel a little less heavy.
Right, it's about finding a balance. Work is important, but it shouldn't be everything. If you have things outside of work that bring you joy, it can help put your work challenges in perspective and maybe make them feel more manageable.
That's so true. Mason, finding that balance is key. We often forget that we're more than just our job titles. There's so much more to life: our passions, our loved ones, our hobbies. When you make time for those things, it can really shift how you feel about everything, including work.
Exactly. It's almost like building a strong foundation. When your life outside of work is fulfilling, it can help you handle the stresses and challenges of work a little better. It gives you a sense of purpose beyond just the 9-to-5 grind.
Yes, and sometimes, when you focus on your personal life, it can even bring fresh energy and creativity to your work. Like when you're feeling happier and more balanced, you might find you're able to approach work problems with a new perspective or even more enthusiasm.
That's a really good point. We can get so caught up in thinking work is the only place we're supposed to find meaning or growth. But often, it's the things we do outside of work that recharge us and keep us motivated in all areas of life.
Right, and I think it's also important to remember that it's okay to step back sometimes. We don't always have to be on when it comes to work. Taking breaks, setting boundaries, and making space for rest is crucial not just for your mental health, but also for your productivity in the long run.
Absolutely. Rest is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Burnout happens when we ignore that need for rest and recovery. And once you hit burnout, it's much harder to come back from that. So, setting those boundaries early on can make a huge difference.
Definitely. And I think another thing people struggle with is the feeling of guilt when they take time for themselves, especially in a culture that often values hustle and productivity above all else. But the truth is, you're no good to anyone if you're running on empty.
Exactly. It's like that old saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. If you're not taking care of yourself, you can't give your best at work or anywhere else for that matter.
That's such a good analogy. And it's important to give yourself permission to take care of that cup, whether it's through a hobby you love, spending time with friends and family, or just taking a quiet moment for yourself.
Yes, and I think one of the best ways to start is by scheduling time for yourself, just like you would for work meetings or appointments. Whether it's exercising, reading, or simply relaxing, it should be a priority on your calendar.
Absolutely. It's about being intentional with your time. When you make space for self-care, you're reinforcing the idea that your well-being is important, and that's empowering.
And it can make all the difference in how you approach your workday. You come in feeling refreshed and ready to tackle whatever comes your way, instead of dragging yourself through the day feeling drained.
Exactly. And sometimes, that's all it takes: a bit of a mindset shift, making sure you're nourishing all parts of your life. And remember, it's okay to adjust your approach if things aren't working. Life is constantly changing, and so are we.
That's so true. It's not about getting everything perfect, but about finding what works for you at any given moment. It's okay to adapt and evolve.
That's such a great point, Mason. It's all about being flexible and recognizing that our needs can change over time. What works for you today might not work a month from now, and that's perfectly okay. The key is to keep checking in with yourself and your feelings about work.
Absolutely. And sometimes people can be afraid to make changes because they're worrying about what others will think or fear the unknown. But often, the biggest growth comes from stepping outside of our comfort zones.
So true, embracing change can be scary, but it can also lead to new opportunities that you never thought possible. And who knows, a change in your work situation might lead you to discover new passions or interests that enhance your life even further.
Exactly, and even small changes can create big impacts. Whether it's speaking up about a project you're interested in, or just taking the time to connect more with your coworkers, those little steps can make your work life much more enjoyable.
Right, and don't forget the importance of seeking support. Whether it's talking to a friend, joining a support group, or even reaching out to a career coach, getting that outside perspective can help you see things in a new light and find practical solutions to your challenges.
That's a valuable insight. Sometimes we feel isolated in our struggles at work, but reaching out to others can remind us that we're not alone. Many people share the same feelings, and talking about it can really help.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up today's discussion, let's remember that feeling unhappy at work is something many people face. But there are steps you can take to improve your situation, whether it's communicating your needs, setting boundaries, or finding support.
Exactly. It's all about taking action and making the changes necessary to reclaim your happiness, not just at work, but in your life overall. We encourage our listeners to reflect on their own work experiences and consider what small steps they can take to make things better.
And remember, it's a journey. There will be ups and downs, but with each step, you're working toward a happier, more fulfilling work life. Thank you so much for joining us today on this important topic.
Yes, thank you all for listening. We hope you found some useful insights and encouragement. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.